Greetings and welcome to the Wild Swans at Coole. In today's video, we are going to understand postmodernism with the help of modernism, and as you can see that we are following the book of Peter Berry, Beginning Theory 4th edition. So I want to request all of you to download the book from the given link in the description, or if you have the book, open it, or you can also buy the book from the link that I have given in the description. So let's begin without any delay. Modernism is important in understanding 20th century culture. So to understand 20th century culture, that means from 1900 to 191999, that means that phase, to understand what has going on in arts and literature, we have to follow the theory modernism. Now, the movement of modernism dominates in the arts and culture of the first half of the 20th century. So, modernism dominates the first half. That means, if not approximately now 1900 to 1920-30, but it is said that Vienna was the center of modernism during the period of 1890 to 1910. But the effect of modernism were felt in France, Germany, Italy, and in Britain. And in Britain, how the effect are felt? In Britain, the effect of modernism were felt through art movements such as Cubism, Dadaism, Surrealism, Futurism. Modernism challenges and rejected the traditional practice of arts. So before 20th century, there are many forms of writing. You know, if as you are an English literature student, you know that in Victorian age, in Romantic age, there are different types of writing. So modernism has one type of writing, and what modernism does, modernism challenges the traditional practice of arts or old forms of arts. And how modernism challenges, for example, melody and harmony are no longer found in music. So when we are writing poetry or when we are singing a song, we always try to find a rhythm, but now modernism has rejected this. So music are no longer harmonious and melodious. Abstraction is preferred in painting over perspective and direct pictorial representation. So pictures have become more abstract. If you follow the history of English literature or the history of England or the history of the 20th century, you will see the difference of the previous age and the age of 20th century. That is, in 20th century, pictures are become very abstract. Geometrical forms are executed in materials like plate glass, concrete, instead of traditional forms and materials like rope, stones, wood bricks. So before, when painters draw roof, stone, wood bricks, they draw it more realistically. That means they copy that. But now it has become very abstract. So while drawing, the people who are following the geometrical shapes, we are calling them modernists. So those modernists started to follow geometrical shapes in drawing, and closed endings, chronological plots are removed. So literature which were before the 20th century there was a sequence, there was a form, but with the with the World War and with the development of scientific development, there were changes. So there were no longer any a perfect structure. The structure is lost. So there was no closed ending. Texts were more like open-ended texts. The reader will have to decide that what kind of meaning he or she want to give, or it becomes very reader oriented. So there were no chronological plots. So the best example is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. If you have know the novel, you will see that there was no chapters. For example, before 20th century, for example, the novel Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South, there were chapter, you will see the chapter 20, Men and Gentlemen, then then there were gold and rust, something like this. So it has a chapter, a perfect plot. Or you can see in the classical age, Aristotle, Plato, they also preferred a perfect structure, a plot. But now with the growing age, that plot structure there is no longer in the sense. So period of high modernism was from 1910 to 1930. It was mostly 20 years from 1910, and some of the important characteristics of literary modernism are how we see rather than what we see. So before it was what we see, so very realistical approach. I mean, what is there, it is being presented, but now it is very inner oriented, very subjective, very impressionistic. What impression does it give to you only matter in the field of literature. So how you see rather than what you see, and very personal narration and not objective. Number 2, blurring distinction between genres and poems. And poems are very prose-like. So before you can differentiate that is a poem, it has a rhythm, a structure, but now there is no difference. Poem, there is enjambment. For example, if you follow follow poems of Ted Hughes, you will see that or Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson has also that notion, but if you follow the poems of Ted Hughes, you will see that the ending of the first stanza, the end line of the first stanza doesn't end on the last line. It completes, and then the second stanza begins with the half line of that is being said in the previous stanza. So blurring distinction between genres. So now you cannot differentiate what is poem and what is song. So poems are prose-like. They are very fragmented forms. Like poems can be 2 to 3 lines, or poems can be a longer, like prose-like. Discontinuous narrative and reflexivity poems, plays, novels, etc. question their own nature and role. So people start questioning intention of this shift. That means from that structure to non-structure, the intention was experimentation and innovation, because scientific development was taking place at that time. Practitioners of modernism are T.S. Eliot. If you follow T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, you will see the difference. James Joyce's text, Virginia Woolf, Franz Kafka, Ezra Pound, Samuel Beckett is also one of the important part of the 20th century literature, and it's better to call him postmodernist. Now the term postmodernist has been around since 1980s, and so that 20th century literature culture, when we are calling 20th century culture, so modernism dominates in the first half, but in the 1980s, that means the last period of the 20th century, was mostly postmodernist. Like how? Now the question Peter Berry raises that in the book, that does postmodernism continues modernism or it opposes modernism? So he gives various examples, and first he says that it continues. How? In the Dictionary of Literary Terms and Literary Theory, J. Corden describes postmodernism as an eclectic approach. That means postmodernist writings uses fragmented forms. So you can see that modernists also uses fragmented forms in the characteristics of literary modernism here that we are calling that fragmented forms. Then aleatory writing means elements of randomness or suddenness. Then parody and pastiche related to abandonment of the omniscient narrator. So now the narrator is also become very personal. When they take Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, you will see that the person who is writing, the narrator, or we can say Wolf, it is very the character oriented, very subjective oriented, and so according to J.A. Carden, postmodernism, so J.A. Carden, he redefines certain aspects of postmodernism, modernism as postmodernism. So it's better that you read the book, the page number 80 in the book, so you will have a better understanding. Now, how it is opposes Jeremy Hawthorne and Edward Arnold in their joint entry Concise Glossary of Contemporary Literary Theory. So they see fragmentation as a feature of 20th century art and culture. So it is C, okay, not C's. It's a mistake. It will be C, not C's. So they Hawthorne and Arnold, they see fragmentation as a feature of 20th century art and culture. So it is not modernism or postmodernism. They called that fragmentation is part of 20th century art and culture, and modernists use fragmentation to register a deep nostalgia for an earlier age when faith was full and authority intact. So modernism use fragmentation as a nostalgia of the past age, whereas postmodernists use fragmentation as an escape to get out from the claustrophobic fixed systems of belief. So modernists lament fragmentation while postmodernists celebrate fragmentation. Now, modernism finds 19th century art forms as deeply offensive and repulsive because it was based on fierce asceticism. Because of this, poems shrink into narrow columns, play with a single speaker and no settings language in Samuel Beckett's play, and postmodernism rejects distinction between high and popular art, which was the distinctive qualities of modernism. So postmodernism, so in modernism there was a high art and low art, right? So but postmodernism differentiates this culture. It disdains modernism asceticism as elitist and cheerfully mixes. So if you open the book Beginning Theory and read page 81, you will see that in the second stanza that an important aspect of modernism was a fierce asceticism which found the over elaborate art forms of the 19th century deeply offensive and repulsive. But the same refined asceticism is seen in literature in the minimalism, which shrinks poems into narrow columns of 2 words. So by contrast, postmodernism rejects the distinction between high and popular art, which was important in modernism. So you see that modernism criticized the art of 19th century, whereas postmodernism does not criticize it. So postmodernism, according to Jürgen Habermas, so there are 3 famous persons on postmodernism whose works are called the landmark in postmodernism. They are Jürgen Habermas, Lyotard and Baudrillard. So what Habermas has said, for Habermas, modernism begins with enlightenment. That means from mid 17th century to mid 18th century. Whereas so the Enlightenment project is the fostering of the belief that tradition, blind habit, slavish obedience to religion should be broken with the application of reason and logic, and this would improve the human society. For example, the French Revolution. So Habermas believed that that concept of modernism, which is breaking from the tradition, has already begun in the Enlightenment age, but now in the 20th century we are calling it modernism. So Enlightenment is also one kind of modernism, but at that time we calls it Enlightenment. So for Habermas, this faith in reason and the possibility of progress survived into the 20th century, and the cultural movement modernism subscribes to this project Enlightenment, and Habermas called this modernity. Now Jean-Francois Lyotard's essay answering the question what is postmodernism, which is later included in Brooker's Modernism/Postmodernism, takes up this debate about the Enlightenment targeting Habermas. According to Brooker, so Lyotard targets Habermas' debate about Enlightenment. So what Brooker has says that, so in Brooker's book, this essay was included later. Lyotard essay what is postmodernism, which also challenges Habermas' idea. So Brooker and Lyotard both has challenges Habermas' idea of postmodernism. According to Brooker, Habermas calls for the end of artistic experimentation to bring order, unity, identity and security. For Lyotard, Habermas' Enlightenment project is like Christianity, Marxism, which is overarching, totalizing explanation of things, and which is meta-narratives. So which the postmodernists follow. These super narratives or grand narratives, what this late 20th century literature does, that it generalizes things. And for example, Mrs. Dalloway, when Mrs. Dalloway is thinking that she is suffering and she thinks that everyone in the world is suffering, everyone has problems, so she is generalizing the differences, she is smoothing the differences, oppositions. And for Lyotard, postmodernism doesn't believe these meta-narratives, because so if we criticize the text of Woolf in postmodernist theory, then we can say that that postmodernism hopes for meeting. So postmodernism thinks that Mrs. Dalloway's life is different than Sarah's life. Mrs. Dalloway's life is different than Peter Wald's life. Though they, so according to modernism, what Mrs. Dalloway is going through in her psyche is the same thing that the other characters are also going through. For example, Warren Septimus, but there is differences. That is what Lyotard is saying. So postmodernism hopes for mini narratives, which is very specific to the actions of the groups in particular local circumstances. So postmodernism actually tries to they also generalize things, but on a class division, on a local circumstances. So if I am not wrong, that means modernism compares individual as a human, but postmodernism is also comparing human, but it is keeping in mind that there is male and female, these differences. Now Jean Baudrillard is associated with the loss of real, which is the influence of images from film, TV, advertising has led to a loss of the distinction between real and imagined, reality and illusion, surface and depth. So with the growing scientific development, and so the reality is somehow lost with the images, because the thing that we are shown in TV, in newspaper, they are actually trying to summarize a reality, but reality is far beyond that. So Baudrillard says a sign was a surface indication of an underlying reality in the past, but he raises a question and says, what if sign is no longer an index of an underlying reality? What will happen if sign no longer represents a reality? For example, in take the text of Samuel Beckett waiting for Godot. So you will see that in the text they are waiting for Godot. Vladimir and Estragon are waiting for Godot. So Godot becomes a symbol or sign. So now Baudrillard is saying that what if Godot is no longer a sign? So what will happen if sign no longer or Godot is no longer a sign that represents reality, but only Beckett's view or Vladimir and Estragon's view about reality? So what will happen then? The whole system, so this idea of sign is based upon some idea or system. So when we are thinking that sign is no longer defining reality, then that whole systems on which the idea of sign is based will fall. So the whole system becomes a simulacrum. He calls that simulacrum, and he says that, and it will substitute when the underlying reality will broke. When the whole system fail, then simulacrum will be substituted with simulation. And he says this in his book Simulations, which is published in 1981, translated in 1983. So what he says, he divides he in four stanzas with a painting. So we are comparing first and second together, and then third and fourth. So his firstly he says that sign represents a basic reality. Then the second stage is sign distorts reality. For example, take a painting. So when you are seeing a painting, okay, that people are suffering and some people are dying, this kind of painting of a city, then you are seeing a reality, but this is not happening for all the people. So some people are dying in the picture, some people are crying, but only that people are crying. But there are also people who does not suffer, because my suffering is not if I am suffering right now, this doesn't mean that everyone in the world is suffering. So it also misrepresents a reality. So how? Because sometimes painting also romanticizes a city, like there is a moon and wind is blowing. So when wind is blowing, a beautiful night, it doesn't mean that everything is beautiful. There is also a reality where people are also suffering. So sign represents a reality and also distort reality. Now number 2, there is no, that means the third stage, there is no corresponding reality underneath, behind the sign. And the fourth stage is the sign does not have any relation to any reality. And the best example is Disneyland and abstract painting. Now I request you to read page 84. Okay, it will give a better understanding, 84 and 85. And you will see that in the third stage he has given a very good example, which is that there is a canvas beside a window, and in the canvas what you are seeing through the window is drawn. So the canvas in which that reality is drawn is one kind of painting, and the reality is another. So when you are seeing the painting on the canvas, you are only seeing that the thing that is being only painted on that canvas. That means the window and the outside that is caught in that small frame, but not beyond that. But when you are not seeing the real window and the outside of the window, the things are there, but that is beyond. That means there is more reality. So a sign does not represent a correspond reality, but whereas in reality there is underneath another reality, and the sign does not have any relation to any reality. Now this is what abstract paintings are. because in abstract painting you cannot find that a true or perfect representation. It is only an abstract form. And the third state, that means there is no corresponding reality or underneath behind the sign or that window and painting scene can be best understood by the Disneyland example. Because in Disneyland what you see is only that Disneyland, only that based on this what is happening around Disneyland, people in Disneyland, the characters in Disneyland, you can only sing that, but you cannot imagine like what is outside Disneyland. So when you are being represented or when you are being shown that Disneyland in TV, you are only seeing that particular Disneyland, not what is outside the Disneyland. So Disneyland as a sign cannot represent the corresponding reality that is with it. So Baudrillard calls these things hyper-reality. So within postmodernism, the distinction between what is real and what is simulated collapses, and everything is a model or an image of a surface without depth. So though you are presenting reality, but you cannot present the whole thing together. Now postmodernist criticism example. So the notion of language has a self-contained system related to the disappearance of the real, and this is very true, because when you are using Disneyland, then it has only a self-contained system, right? Like what is outside Disneyland cannot be represented. So when we claim that something is true, we are not measuring it against some external absolute standard, but by internal rules and criteria which operate only within the designated sphere. So when you are judging something, though we think that we are judging it perfectly, but actually not true. We are only judging that thing based on our knowledge and some external absolute standard that are available in front of our eyes, or we know through knowledge. So which operate only within that designated sphere and have no transcendent status beyond that. When you are calling it reality, you are using your memory or desire knowledge. So the reality is framed based on your knowledge, on your memory, on your desire. So this is not true reality, because what is reality for me may not be true for you. So that is what hyperreality or simulacrum is, and this is what Baudrillard is saying. I hope you have liked this video, and if you have liked this video, please make sure to like, share and subscribe, and again we will meet with psychoanalytic criticism.